And some wild claims about bizarre behavior inside the Miramar brig from a male inmate against female guards and a counselor.
A rape survivor has told the ENCA how he struggled when he reported the matter purely because he's a man.
Sexual violence against men and boys has also been used as a weapon of war.
Sexual assault in the military has long been swept under the rug.
He was troubled by the screams he himself could hear coming from boys being sexually abused.
While a vast majority of those victims are girls, boys are also being trafficked every day.
1 out of 33 men in the U.S. have been victims of attempted or completed rape, meaning men are vastly more likely to be sexually assaulted than to be falsely accused of rape.
For men, it's estimated that 1 in 6 are affected by sexual violence, which is inordinately high. And just for the other end of that, so 1 in 3 women are estimated to be affected by sexual violence. It's estimated that 96% of men actually never go on to speak about their experience of sexual violence. So that obviously will skew that number. I think Rape Crisis in 2017, they reported that 12,000 men reported they were victims or survivors of rape in 1 year. But again, obviously that is a reported statistic. It is obviously significantly higher than 12,000, but we just don't have that. We don't have that research at the moment. When it comes to sexual violence, again, there is very little research into perpetration. For sexual abuse specifically, so when sexual violence is towards someone under the age of 18, it is predominantly male offender. But it's around 60% male perpetrator and 40% female perpetrator. So it is actually very close, but there is a significant lack of awareness around female perpetration of sexual violence. And it's very interesting when we think about that, because it's a very hard narrative for us to think about. It's very, very startling. In the narratives of society, we think that, older women have this maternal instinct about them, and we think still for some reason these gender roles are being put on people, and of course they are a little bit outdated. But for them to then flip that on its head and understand that this maternal person can also be a perpetrator of sexual violence, it's very difficult. When it comes to sexual violence in general, so rape, sexual assault, there are so many differing pieces of evidence that show that it is majority male, majority female. Perpetrators of sexual violence are more often male. Now, within the law, legally, rape is defined as penile penetration. So even within the law, rape of a male via a female perpetrator is non-existent. It is sexual assault via penetration. It can be very invalidating if for an average of 26 years, someone has said, I am a survivor of rape. That is what I am. And then the first thing they are told is, well, you're not a survivor of rape, you're a survivor of sexual assault. That can be very invalidating for that person. There's a massive myth around speaking about sexual violence that as soon as you talk about it, that you're instantly going to feel a weight lifted, which for some people it is true. But for the majority, it becomes a lot harder, it becomes a lot more real. And that's when a lot more work is put on this person. And sometimes that can be too much for someone. They can start to think about things that might not be very healthy. They can start to consider suicidal thoughts. They can start to act on these thoughts. Or we could also think about harming someone else. So there might be a lot of anger, understandably. And there's also that myth around this idea that men are always in a constant state of wanting sex, or in a predatory state of wanting sex, which is not true. But the reason why this myth is so harmful is because if a male survivor is raped, sexually abused, sexually assaulted, hearing that myth that, well, because I experienced an erection or ejaculation or any form of orgasm, did that mean that I actually wanted that? Was that not sexual violence? Because I was physiologically aroused by that situation. Did I actually want that? Is that because I, as a man, am constantly in a state of wanting sex, which is of course not true. And a big myth that I hear, and that is quite prevalent still, as well as the criminal justice system, is that gay men are more likely to be victims or survivors of sexual violence, which isn't true. There's that perception that because from the outside looking in, as I mentioned, I'm a gay man myself, that on the outside looking in, that the community is sexualized, that there is a constant need for sex, and that's what that whole community is all about, for some reason means that they are more at risk of sexual violence. And why this is really harmful is for a survivor who identifies as gay, or just for a survivor who has sex with the same sex. It can be really harmful because they can then start to blame themselves and their own lifestyle for that experience of sexual violence. And it has nothing to do with that. It is the only person to blame, as I mentioned, is that perpetrator of sexual violence. Sexual violence for so many ways is ridiculed, is made to be seen as humorous, it's made to be seen as something that we shouldn't take seriously. And I'd like to start off by talking about the media. Somewhere along the way, someone somewhere decided that this topic is something to be joked about in the media. And the media, whether we like it or not, is so pivotal to society. I mean, it changes us whether we don't own a TV, radio, laptop, whatever, whether we hide away from it. It still has such an impact on our lives. And things like massive TV shows like Saturday Night Live, Family Guy, cartoons like the Powerpuff Girls and SpongeBob SquarePants, these shows include male rape and sexual abuse jokes because for some reason these are funny or are seen as funny. So things like with SpongeBob SquarePants, there's jokes around dropping the soap, and there's Powerpuff Girls, jokes around one of the main villains of that show going to prison and being raped in prison, because that's apparently something to joke about around children especially.
Brian, if you don't mind, we'll start thinking up our prison rape jokes immediately. I'll break the ice. Hey, Brian, did you do hard time or hardly working?
That creates this myth before we're even exposed, hopefully, to education around this topic, which a lot of us aren't lucky enough to have anyway. We are told that it can be joked about. So if that's the only narrative that we're shown, of course that's what we're going to believe. And of course that's what we're going to internalize until we are faced with something potentially traumatic. If I was a survivor of sexual violence and all I had seen was male rape and sexual abuse jokes, how am I to know that it should be taken seriously? I think one of the biggest myths I always hear is that men aren't as affected by this topic. Now, numerically, yes, female survivors are affected more. But for some reason, I think people also interchange that with the psychological, the emotional, the physical effects of sexual violence. And in reality, men, boys, non-binary, transgender people, all people are just as likely to experience these traumas post-abuse. But because of this lack of awareness, these myths and these stigmas around male rape and sexual abuse and sexual violence related to non-binary people, they're just much less likely to speak about it or feel able to speak about it. Thank you for your bravery. Whether you feel able to speak right now or you don't, or you have previously and it might not have gone so well, or even if you didn't, it did go well. Or if you're thinking about doing it, but you just don't know when. Thank you for just being so strong. You are in no rush, I hope, to tell someone your story, and you are under no pressure to do so. If you feel like you are in that basket of, I want to, but I just don't know when, it can be really hard to wait for that reason. And I think sometimes the best reason comes from yourself. If you are feeling in a resilient place as best as possible, especially this year, that you feel able to talk to anyone, I recommend that's when you do it. If you want that first step to be completely anonymous, you wanted it to be confidential, you just wanted that space to say, this happened to me and I feel crap, or I feel angry, or I feel great, I feel strong. We are a service that can be there for you. Our helpline is open 7 days a week, 12 till 8 p.m. We will always try and support you as an individual with your own unique experience.